Hello, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name is Guthrie, and I'm here with Susan. Hi, Susan.
Hello, Guthrie.
All right, so today is going to be, we're going to be talking a little bit about ethics.
It's Ethics Day.
It's Ethics Day. Hopefully one of a couple days.
Every day is Ethics Day.
Today is Ethics Day. That's what I say.
Oh.
So the whole point of this is just to talk a little bit about some upcoming new content that we have. Susan's done a lot of UX certificates. She has the Brain and Behavioral Science certificate. There's all kinds of stuff that she's doing in that regard. I've been working on some of my own content, as many of you know. I'm a behavioral economist, so I did a whole behavioral economics certificate, and the next one I'm doing is ethics.
And these are online video courses.
Yep, courses.theteamw.com. You can find that. It's not quite done. I'm still working on it, but 4 of the 6 courses are edited and finalized. But there's always lots more work to do. So with that being said, we just wanted to cover one of the small little things because we've been editing these courses, and Susan was like, "Hey, these are really cool. Let's do one of these."
Yeah, for our podcast, because I really liked some of the content, and I thought we should share it out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, what's where should we start?
Well, wow, that's a great question.
You want me to start?
Yeah, you can start. I mean, maybe give a little bit of setting it up in terms of this particular piece you're going to talk about in this podcast. Where does it fit in terms of thinking about ethics? Why is this piece important? What is the piece we're going to be talking about, and why is it important before you launch into what it is?
So this comes from one of my courses, which is going to be Ethics in the Corporate World. I also talked about it in some of my keynotes. It's sort of a thought I've been having. A lot of these certificates don't just. It's not like we sit down with a blank, in front of a blank typewriter and just start from scratch. A lot of these things have been thinking about and building for years, and they're ideas that kind of came from here and came from there and get plucked and get reconfigured and sort of put together then. So I, even though I sort of start from scratch every time, mentally I'm not starting from scratch. I have some of the ideas sort of already ready to go.
Percolating.
And so this is in my Ethics in the Corporate World course. I have what I call the 4 influencers of corporate society and ethics.
And by influencers, you don't mean celebrities.
No, but it's actually kind of used in the same term. What's your definition of an influencer?
Well, there's the celebrity influencer, social media influencer, but in this case, I think initially, when I was watching some of your videos and I saw the word influencer, I thought that's what you meant. But then I realized very quickly that what you mean are things that influence the ethics of a particular organization.
I mean, look, the thing about in the marketing term, people use the word influencer. I have the top definition on Urban Dictionary.
What is it?
A word Instagram users use to describe themselves to make them feel famous, and more important, when no one really knows who they are or care. Usually the type of people that call themselves foodies and post pictures of their avocado and toast because they can't really do anything else interesting.
Okay, that's
usually also post their last holiday asking someone to #TakeMeBack.
Okay, someone was having a bad day when they wrote that entry on Urban Dictionary.
That was by We Talkin' 'Bout Practice, August 4th, 2018. So the funny thing is that in 2018, there was probably a negative connotation. Since then, it's probably become a little more positive just because of the way the market has moved. The point is that there are certain people, you can call them maybe like brand ambassadors. Oh, that's a much better one.
Okay, but this is not what you mean.
There are certain people, certain entities that have outside influence in regards to what people see and what people hear and the decisions that people make.
Yes.
So that's all it is. Okay, so let's talk about the four. Just because it's a little different than Instagram. The first one is the free market. I mean, that's kind of a construct. That's not exactly selling, shoes. So there's the free market, the government, corporate leadership, and the employees. So those are the it's like the four methods, the four avenues, the four types of organizations or institutions that influence, change, stop ethical or unethical corporate behavior.
Okay.
And so that's my I'm gonna go ahead and say that's the only way that corporations are influenced is one of those four categories.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Bold.
Well, if you can find any exceptions, let me know.
Okay.
So should we? Where should we start? Should we just?
I think you should just dive into one of them and explain why you think that's a very important influencer for ethics in a corporation. What it is and why you think it's got a lot of influence on ethics.
So let's start with the free market. Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And in my course, I do like the regular spiel, and then I give like the cynical spiel at the end, which is basically that like, hey, this is all terrible, and like I talked.
So are you going to give both?
I don't know if I'll give the socialist spiel.
Okay.
You guys, if you guys want that, you can.
All right, so just give us the regular.
Yeah, I know people who are dyed-in-the-wool socialists, and so they gave me like the, sort of like the eye roll. So I'm going to say it, but if you're rolling your eyes, don't worry. In the course, I cover the cynics.
The eye rolling version.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, but we're not going to do that.
Yeah, so I kind of start this section out by saying like, let's dismiss the Marxist critiques of capitalism.
Okay.
Let's just assume, for ethical purposes, Reagan was right. Capitalism...
Ronald Reagan.
Capitalism is...
Why are you laughing?
I just thought it was... Okay, so for some of our younger audience members out there who maybe don't know, can you just explain Ronald Reagan?
Do you want me to explain Ronald Reagan?
Yeah, I think it'd be a fun thought exercise. You just
All right,
explain
just very
Ronald
briefly,
Reagan in like 15 seconds.
Ronald Reagan was a president of the United States,
great.
and I do not know the exact years.
1980 to 1988.
Thank you. 1980 to 1988. He was, before he was president, he was a very well-known actor in Hollywood. And for many years, like we're talking going back, I don't know, to the 40s.
Could you give him like a modern equivalent?
Oh, you mean in terms of being an actor?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Was he well known? Was he?
Oh yeah, he was a Leonardo DiCaprio.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
He was very well known, leading Hollywood.
Yeah. Okay, that's all. Okay, you gave the example.
And then he became president, and he was a conservative Republican president. He was very popular among Republicans and conservative Republicans. He had 2 terms as president. And he had a lot of very strong economic opinions about things and about the free market. That
Which were?
Oh, you said I was supposed to give just...
You can't do it in a sentence?
A small...
Okay, fine. I'll do it.
You're going beyond my knowledge here.
Don't forget, this was the end of the Cold War. So there was
Thank
still
you.
like a capitalism versus communism thing going on.
Yeah.
And Reagan was maybe the peak.
Trickle down economics.
There we go. Okay, see? Yeah.
I just
So
remembered.
his sort of thing invented trickle down economics, which is let's lower taxes for people at the top, and they will put the ingenuity of the capitalist engine to work, and that wealth will trickle down across the entire
and
economy.
eventually everyone will do better.
Correct.
That was the theory. And it was kind of a new idea, at least at that time in America, and it became very popular.
Thank you. This is why I needed you to do it. I was alive for like 1 month of the Reagan presidency.
Of that,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
I was definitely around.
I don't
for that.
remember that. So let's just assume Reagan was right. Capitalism, perfectly efficient, and we're gonna make some free market arguments for why the free market will make companies ethical.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about the possible link between the free market and ethics inside companies.
Yes. Now, again, I am aware that there's a cynical critique of this.
That the eye rolling has started.
Yeah, but
we're
not doing
we're
that.
gonna ignore that.
I'm going to give just the free market.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Do it.
So the argument kind of goes like this. This is why the free market influences capitalism. Or influences ethics.
Ethics, yeah.
So one, there's a short-term and long-term return on investment here. If you treat your customers well, and we'll just use broad strokes, you may lose money in the short term. But in the long term, that's actually the most successful business strategy. Supporting good, in quotes, companies that whatever that society finds ethical, companies that support the ethics of whatever the culture and society really wants, becomes part of the story of the company, the values they hold, and that translates into the feelings that customers have. Maybe you can say to buy organic, or all the whatever the companies are that you like to support.
So you're saying if I'm a customer and I feel like I like buying things from this company, I feel they put out a quality product, I feel like they care about their customers.
They do. We'll just say do ethical stuff.
Do whatever it is defined as ethical stuff. Okay.
People in the long run, you'll make more money. You'll have this support. You'll have this base of clients. You'll be able to just continue to just do your thing and be successful. In the short run, in the short term, it may be more profitable to be unethical. Now, so just in terms of a pure free market capitalism context,
yeah,
making all your stakeholders better, right? And it's not shareholders but stakeholders, which is this idea of corporations there are different people who have a stake in the success of a company. There's the community the company is located in. Mm-hmm. There's the employees of the company. There's the owners, the shareholders of the company. There's the customers. All these people are stakeholders, and so there's this idea that if you actually elevate all the stakeholders, that's the optimum strategy for long-term capitalistic success. If you push too far, especially with ethics, you will face backlashes in the market, and that's when things sort of go awry. If you push too far, customers will leave.
So you're saying if you follow in this non-cynical view, if you follow the basic premises of a free market, in looking at the long-term view,
Mm-hmm.
it should lead you to a more ethical behavior as a company?
Yeah, one analogy that I would use is, all these tech companies maybe took advantage of some stuff and did some unethical things, and yeah, Facebook made a lot of money in the short term, but now I know people who delete their Facebook. They don't use it as much. People are trying not to buy on Amazon, etc., etc., etc. Now, there is a reality that I will just do a sprinkle of the cynicism. I won't do the full thing. But, clearly in markets where there's monopolistic power, where certain players can just dominate a market, where maybe large companies have an outside influence on regulation, if there's not a competitive free market environment, well, then those things don't apply.
So then there are you're saying in that cynical view that we're not talking about, except that we are, but we're not going to go into a lot of detail on. In that cynical view, if it's possible that you would follow, the free market influence might not always lead to ethical.
What I would say is, maybe a better way to phrase that is, I would have an argument that actually the free market would lead to more ethical behavior, ... But we rarely have a perfectly free market because these large companies, they're not competing in equal space. Who's Facebook's competitor? If you're,
one of the companies they bought is their competitor.
Right? It's just sort of like, okay.
Yes, I get you.
Right? Yeah, there's only a couple phone companies out there.
But you're saying the free market can be an important influence.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
At least there's an argument for that.
Okay.
The cynical view, of course, destroys that argument. But
all right. So anyway, that's one influence.
That's one influence. One? Yeah.
You want to move on to the next one?
Yeah. Now, I will say that let's just take it to the extreme.
Okay.
Let's say you're a company and you start promoting, I don't know, genocide or something like terrible, right?
Totally unethical.
Completely, ridiculously.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever culture the company's in, you're gonna lose business.
Right.
Probably, right? So just as an extreme, the free market is exerting some sort of influence on companies to behave a certain way. Now, if you want to look at other sort of ways, there's certainly companies try to be trendy and be up with their audience. The point is that there is sort of an interaction there between the free market. All right, so that's one.
Okay. Two. What are you going to talk about next?
The second big influencer is the government.
Okay.
So, if the government passes rules that says you have to abide by these certain ethical standards and frameworks, well, then if you're a company, you have to abide by those.
Now, the government could mean anything. It could be a national government. Could it be like a state government?
Yeah, that's very federalist of you. Sure. In the United States, we have local, state, county.
Okay. All right. So government you're using in a general term.
Wherever the corporation is bound by the laws.
Okay.
Now there are many instances in some industries, usually after terrible bad ethical practices have happened, that have high requirements on what companies can and cannot do. I will give car safety as a premier example.
Okay.
There was the famous Ford Pinto case in the United States, where there was this crap little car called the Ford Pinto. Do you remember the Ford Pinto?
Yes.
And normally it was fine. But the gas tank was put in the rear of the car. And every so often, when there was a accident where, the Pinto would be rear-ended, it would just explode into flame.
Burst into flames, and which was not good for the occupants.
Not good for the occupants. Now, it didn't happen very often, but it was a design, I will just say a design flaw. It came out later that Ford knew that this was happening and did a little calculation, and that they found the smoking gun, these documents in court, which is the only reason the case is famous. I'm sure it's happened elsewhere, but they just didn't find that smoking gun, where someone at Ford said, well, I know these people are dying in balls of flame because our cars explode, but if we just settle those cases, it'll cost, so many dollars.
Rather than.
But if we have to change the entire every Pinto, that'll cost so many more dollars. We can't have that. And
so now, what's the government end of this?
Well, so what ended up happening was, of course, the public found out that Ford knew that their cars were killing people and didn't do anything, and this was seen as a ethical faux pas, and which, of course, prompted all this government regulation. If anyone's in the auto industry, you will know that the safety standards for cars severely limit how a car can be designed. There are so many rules. There are just so many rules about what you have to do as far as cars and safety and airbags and all sorts of stuff. It's just a regulated industry. Healthcare is another industry that's very, very heavily regulated. So if you're a doctor, okay, in the United States at least, it's illegal for you to get what's called a kickback. We would call it in our industry a referral fee to prescribe, we'll just say, medication. Right? So for us, if hey, if anyone out there wants to be an advocate for us and sell our courses for us, we'll give you 15% of the revenue. If you want to sell our courses, that's pretty standard in most industries. In the medical industry, it seems unethical for doctors to be getting paid by the pharmaceutical companies directly for, based on the number of, opioids that they push. And so there are laws and rules that prohibit that kind of behavior.
So in this way, the government is an influencer of ethics.
Yeah, and if we look at some of the more modern stuff, California is considering a law that would outlaw certain dark patterns. Europe has been various places in Europe have been very, I guess we'll just say, proactive on consumer privacy, like GDPR. Wait, did I say that right?
Yeah.
GDPR. There's anti-loot box regulation when it comes to video games for minors. There are various, there's plenty of ways the government can force companies to do whatever they want and behave in the ethical behavior that their societies want. So that's certainly one of the ways. Now, the cynical view, a little bit, is basically that, especially in the United States, we're pretty reactive. Very rarely is government regulation proactive here, where we're going to actually be solving problems. Usually, the government is waiting until it's far too late and all the damage has been done, and then they need to do something so that they look okay.
Or so that they prevent more future damage.
Yeah. And there's other more cynical views about how the government is anti-democratic and has the same incentive to keep the current power structure and all kinds of fun stuff. So that's but obviously the government can force companies to do what they want, and so that could be an agent of change, an influencer on ethics.
Okay.
Other small examples of ethics in the government. Think of a lot of the investor regulatory banking regulations, insider trading.
Mm-hmm.
That's another example where there's
probably a lot then.
What do you mean a lot?
It sounds like there's a lot of different ways that government influences ethical behavior.
Yeah, governments can pass laws to do whatever they want. Okay, the next one is a little more interesting, and that's corporate leadership.
Okay.
Well, this makes sense. Corporate leadership, can be a very strong influencer of corporate behavior because they're literally in charge.
What do you mean by corporate leadership?
Corporate leadership can mean a bunch of different things. It's the people at the helm of the company, or persons, or shareholders, whoever's in charge. Sometimes maybe you can call it the C-suite, the people who are making decisions. So like sometimes that's like one charismatic person, you know, like if Jeff Bezos at Amazon, though he's stepping down, but when he was running Amazon, you know, if he said, "Hey, we're doing this," the company was doing that. You know?
Yeah.
That he was just very influential. In maybe let's just look at another company that doesn't have such like a singular strong leader, but you know there are policies that happen on the highest tier, the C-suite, corporate level, about hey, this is what our goals are as a company. You got the shareholders. Are we maximizing profit? What does that look like? And a classic example is what's called a certified B corporation.
Okay.
Do you know anything about a certified B corporation?
I know a little bit because I watched your course where you talked about it.
So nothing says that a company has to make money. Nothing says that making more money is better. That's like a company can decide what their goals are as an organization. And so a certified B corporation, from their website, it says certified B corporations are a new kind of business that balances purpose and profit. They are legally required to consider the impact of their decisions on their workers, customers, suppliers, community, and the environment. This is a community of leaders driving a global movement of people using business as a force for good.
Now, if you're a C corporation in the U.S., for instance, or an S corporation.
C corporations are the largest that have shares. S corporations are smaller corporations that are not publicly traded.
I mean, if you're one of those, you can decide that you're going to do ethical things. But the difference with a B corporation is it's not legally built into the structure of your corporation the way it is in a B corporation. Is that right?
Yeah. So the difference is think of any old publicly traded company, you know. They can say things, right? They say things like, "We support the environment."
Yeah.
Like you can say stuff.
They can say anything you want, but it doesn't mean.
Yeah, whereas a certified B corporation, there are legal requirements that the company has set down, where it's like, hey, we have to, for example, and it depends on the company, right? They can kind of determine how far they want to go. But let's just say, why isn't it in the company's rules that the company has to be carbon neutral every year? Like there's a legal requirement for the company to be carbon neutral, or there are penalties.
Yeah, but it's not like the government is
Correct.
forcing these things. This is they built it into the structure of the corporation.
Right.
And then they are legally bound.
Yeah. There are
How many of
rules.
how many of these B corporations are out there? And this is relatively new, isn't it?
The certified B Corp movement is relatively new. There is if you want to put on my conservative economics-y hat, there is a long history, at least, of companies attempting to be good stewards. I mean, I don't think that's particularly new. Of at least the self stories that corporations have that they're doing good in the world and saving the world in various ways. I don't think that's particularly new, but certainly to look at it a little more holistically is probably a little newer.
But in terms of this third influencer that you're talking about, which is corporate leadership,
Yeah.
you're not saying you have to be a B corporation in order to be applying this corporate leadership influence.
No, that is an example. But the corporate leadership, how the company is structured, how the CEOs decide to make things, what the shareholders want, they can take a company wherever they want to take it. You know? Like
So there's this. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
well, no, you go ahead, ask your question.
Well, there's this fine line, I think, between just saying stuff, like having corporate leadership, having the C-level executives, make pronouncements.
Mm-hmm.
On that, but as sometimes they do that, and then they follow through, and then they're influencing the ethics one way or the other. But sometimes they just say things, and it sounds good, but they don't really take action, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm talking about, yes.
You're talking about when they really do have an influence. Like there's a company that
No. Look,
What?
the corporate leadership
Yeah.
always gets to decide. They're the influence. So, okay, let's take diversity, right?
Okay.
The corporate leadership, the people who are running the company, the shareholders, whoever is making the rules and policies from a top-down level, they could say, we think diversity is important, right? All the big companies say that diversity is important. But most of the time, it's basically diversity theater, where it kind of looks like you're being diverse, but you're not actually being diverse at all. Diversity theater. So a company could say, no. We're taking diversity actually seriously. And we're going to set standards where it's in the hiring guidelines that you should prefer candidates. Well, there are lots of laws and stuff. So now we're getting into. I picked a terrible example. We take diversity seriously, and so for every dollar, we'll do it this way: for every dollar in profit that we make as a company, we will donate half of all of our profits to entrepreneurial funds for minority populations. That's one way to do it. Why not have, our goal as a company is to have, a majority diverse C-suite, which is the highest echelon of a company. Our goal is to prefer hiring with people who have difficult backgrounds growing up or something. But
it's not just diversity. There could be all kinds of things.
Yeah, pick your hey, we love the environment.
Or
you could say that, and then you could say, hey, we're as a company, we don't pay for air travel. We try to avoid air travel as much as possible because of the carbon emissions, right? So there is a difference between just saying things and then corporate leadership actually doing something about it.
So let me ask a question, though, because you phrase this as corporate leadership, but you're talking more about corporate policies. Are you equating those two things? Putting you on the spot here. Or is corporate leadership, is it just the policies and whether they're, or is it also a more esoteric?
No, it's more than that. I think there's a deeper level to it. So for example, if you have corporate leadership that says, hey, I want to take ethics really, really, really seriously. I'm telling you from the top, this is the priority for this company. Okay? I want to see all the middle managers do things this way. Yes, that also comes out in policies. But just the tone, the tenor.
Yeah.
The classic kind of example is the Steve Jobs thing. We are shooting for the moon. We are this crazy innovative company. We do everything with passion. And I'm sure, like, that sort of cultish Steve Jobs ethic, whatever, trickled down throughout Apple. And people on the teams took their cue from him.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I mean, it's part of the whole corporate culture. I was going to say before, years ago, I had a company that I was doing consulting for, and I went to their headquarters for a tour of let's say the distribution facility. So they sold clothing, and they were going to give me a tour of, the whole distribution, clothing coming in, clothing coming out, and how they did everything. And this was like I think it was a VP of something that was giving me the tour. And I remember, we were walking through the headquarters, through the office area, and then into the distribution center. And, he's talking about the history of the company. And I'm looking around, and I've gotten tours before of a lot of different companies that I've done consulting work with. And I am really struck by the fact that at this place, people are, whether it's in the office or whether it's in the distribution warehouse, people are walking around. I don't know how to describe it, except that they seem to have a sense of purpose, and they seem to be really engaged in what they were doing, but they also seemed really upbeat and not as tired. I mean, there's a certain amount of tiredness and grumpiness, I guess, that I was used to seeing when you're, at a place of work. And everyone here seemed like they were more happier and more upbeat and more, collaborating with other people. And I commented on this to the guy who was giving me the tour, and he said, "Oh, well, this comes from the top. This is our founder and our CEO, and here are the principles that he says are really important for the company, and he really lives them, and the message gets infiltrated through everything and everybody, and that's why people love working here." And that I was really struck at that point, enough that I remember it decades later, about how the personality and the policies and the from a top corporate leader can have a big effect in many ways throughout the whole company. It really did seem, from what I knew about the company, and then it seemed as I worked with them, it was confirmed that really had a big effect in the company in many ways, including ethics. So there's this. I mean, it's hard to define or what that means in this case, corporate leadership, except that I felt like I had a sense of it. And I think it's tied in with corporate culture that's coming from the top.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's always I listen to a lot of history, podcasts. I do a lot of history. I'm kind of a history buff. And when it comes to like war and fighting and nations, there's this like untangible thing called like morale, or the culture of the people in the army. And on one hand, the easiest way to measure war stuff is like how many tanks and how many planes and how many soldiers, and but for whatever reason, there are just these intangible things that it's really hard to measure the importance of it. What's the value of a company when the CEO comes out and says, Black Lives Matter? What is that? How does that change what the rest of the company then is free to do or express, or the way that they implement stuff, or they understand what the priorities are? That's sort of the question there. It's like, what's the value of that? How do you measure that? I don't know. It's hard to say, but it's definitely important. And I think some may argue it's a little important, and some may argue it's actually like critically important, even more important than the policies and procedures.
Well, I think it has to do. I'm really into. You are too, behavioral science and social behavior, and I think there's a lot. There's what the corporate leadership not only says, but what they do and how they act, influences the norms of that organization. And then you have a sense when you're there, when you're dealing, as an employee at least, what's okay, what's not okay, what are the ethics of this group that I'm with. And yeah, I can see that. All right, so that was the third one, right? Was corporate leadership. So we've talked about, you got to remind me. We talked about
I want to say one quick more thing, last little thought about corporate leadership.
About corporate leadership, yeah.
Well, one of the weird things is that almost every company kind of looks the same. Like, why is there a chief financial officer, CFO, in like every company?
Yeah. I don't know, I guess because that's an important role.
Why? Why doesn't every company have a chief happiness officer?
Because
there are no rules.
We care about money more than we care about happiness.
Right? Like, you can do whatever you want.
I would really like to have it.
Why is it called a chief? Why isn't it called?
Can we have a chief happiness officer in our company?
Yes, we can, because you can just. It's all the stuff's just made up. You can do whatever you want. Companies are awesome.
I bet somebody has that.
Yeah, I'm sure that someone does, but my point is that
it's not common.
Yeah, why is it called CEO?
Everybody has
a
president? CEO, a COO, a CFO, a CMO. CTO.
It's the same. Yeah, it's the same thing. General counsel. The structure is always exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like in every single company.
Yeah.
Why are the departments always silos? Why is there the C-suite and then the vice presidents and then the managers?
All right. Why? Because it's the best
I don't
way
know.
to do it. Oh.
Okay, so there's two arguments. One is that there's like a cynical view that it's this whole power hierarchy and like the sort of rich ruling elite is all the same, and they hang out with other, like CEOs hang out with other CEOs, and there's just like this monoculture of this is how a business is supposed to be.
Okay.
Much in the way that maybe it's like, this is how, like maybe in the Victorian England, this is how a lady of society is supposed to dress.
Okay.
Right? There are like all these rules, and that's what you do.
Expectations, norms, rules.
They're dumb, but like that's what it is, and that's why it's all the same. So that's sort of this sort of a cynical view. The counter to that is what's called the rocket ship problem.
Rocket ship problem.
So think of like every single rocket ship that exists, not sci-fi.
Not sci-fi,
real
life.
Yeah, you were talking SpaceX, and Blue Origin, and NASA. Yeah, the Suez rockets or whatever.
Okay.
What do they look like?
They're big. They're very tall. They're usually cylindrical, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, they're tall cylinders with pointy tops.
Yeah.
They're long, tall things with pointy tops with a rocket on the bottom and a pointy top on the top.
Yeah.
Now, why do all the rockets look the same?
Because
right? Is it because there's like
science?
Right. So is there just some sort of monoculture of rocket engineers that kind of have
I don't
it all
know
look
the answer
same
to this,
because
but
that's what a rocket is supposed to look like?
I would assume it's because the science.
Yeah, right. Or is it because going into space is really hard, and there's sort of a best way to do it, which is to have low air drag and blah blah. So, you can go and read all the in the airports, they have the little books about corporate leadership or whatever. A lot of companies kind of run into the same problem that is every other company, about you're going to have
How do we
employees
make money?
and power
How do we
dynamics.
get customers? How do we
What
motivate
expansion?
our
Yeah, if you have 10 employees, how is that
employees?
different than 100 employees? And how is that different than 1,000 employees? So in theory, a lot of companies kind of run into the same problems. And so the reason all the companies look the same is because there's kind of best answers to those solutions. And,
Okay.
and so companies are all doing the same thing because they're all facing the same problems.
Okay.
So that is that's sort of the rocket ship problem. I don't know which one is true, and maybe it's a little bit of mix of both. But I just wanted to share that.
All right. So we've talked about the free market influence on ethics. We've talked about the government influence on ethics, and then the corporate leadership influence.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
what's the fourth one?
Fourth one is employees, the employees of the company.
So the employees are an influencer on ethics.
Yes, and probably the most important one, actually. And
Really?
the one that's, it's probably the thing that most commonly is making a difference. So the argument kind of goes like this. Companies want the best and brightest talent. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
For at least, and I'm going to stick to where these policies are being made, which is generally corporate HQ. All right, so I understand that there might be, think of like AutoZone or whatever. Like there are people, who are actually in the field behind a cash register, but the ethics of a corporation is probably going to be made in the corporate headquarters.
Okay.
Right, so let's just kind of keep that in mind, not like
Okay.
the people doing. So these generally, if you want the best and brightest, there's competition, and you want to be a company that people want to work for, and you want your employees to be happy. Why? Because unhappy employees are bad. If you're a company, you just want your employees to kind of be quiet and do their work. You don't want company-wide memos. You don't want strikes. You don't want you want them focusing on their work.
And you want them to stay.
Yeah. So, and finally, employees are in the room where it happens. Like literally, when these decisions are being made about should we do policy X or policy Y, the employees are the ones in the room making these decisions. So
Well, sometimes it's the C-suite, though, making the decision.
all the C-suite are employees too, but yes,
Okay.
yes, that's why C-suite is corporate leadership, but this is the step below them, right? The
Okay.
C-suite can make the decisions, but it still has to be implemented by the people underneath them,
Okay.
right? Like it's all like they're sort of where the rubber meets the road, to some extent. And so the thoughts and views and opinions and desires of this body of people is going to be heavily influential on the actions of a company. Now, in the United States, what's interesting is the corporate. This is my fun data point. The corporate HQ of most companies are filled with young, middle-aged, generally progressive, well-educated workers from urban areas, which generally tend to be rather progressive. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If most companies in the United States sell to every end of the political spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So if the thought was we just want to make our customers happy, you would see the political stances of companies mirror their customer base, which is sort of in the middle. What we've seen recently, I think, is most companies actually have leaned into taking political stances that are on the more progressive side of the spectrum. They seem to be doing that not because they want to sell to progressives. I think because they're facing pressure from their employees with it. And they're just trying to make their urban, younger, well-educated, progressive employee base happy. They want to be seen as the type of company that is X or Y. So that's a good data point, a good argument for actually that's why the employees are so important, because the policies of whatever the company is just seem to mirror whatever the employees of the company are. And I think that's sort of an interesting, out of those 4 influencers, it kind of looks like the employees are the most powerful. And finally, let's just say you're trying to influence the C-suite. Think of the power. If you literally are seeing the people at work, right? If you're the CEO and you have to go to work with your employees and you're seeing them and they're angry and they're doing stuff, that's going to be much more influential than if you're in a meeting with someone who's arguing for point X or Y than some person on the outside writing a blog or something.
The theoretical idea that quote customers, because you might not have a lot of contact with your customers. They might, it's more real if it's your employees, because like you said, you see them, they're right there in front of you, maybe. It depends how high, right? If you're in the C-suite, maybe you're not seeing people on the ground, but right. So there is this sort of like big, especially big companies, this employee advocacy, this kind of change from within, and I think when it comes to ethics and dark patterns and corporate memos, that's generally where you're seeing the pressure. It's yes, there's noise from the outside, but it's the noise from the inside which is really enacting change in companies. That's when the noise and the pressure spills from the outside about ethical stuff to the employees themselves. That's when action gets taken. So that's the argument for why employees are so maybe critical. Yeah. As an influence there. All right. So there's the 4 influencers. Now, can we, before we finish up, can we just talk for a second about the the ethics certificate? So you have one course on this topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
The 4 influencers. What are the other courses or topics? What kinds of other stuff are you covering in the ethics certificate? And I have to ask you because it isn't published yet, and so I haven't memorized it yet. So I could probably, I've been working with you over time and seeing some of the things you're working on, but I don't have it on top of mind.
So this is the point of this ethics certificate is for it to be applied ethics. There are I do not have a PhD in ethics.
You are not philosophy. An ethics professor.
I'm not an ethics professor. There are other good people who have done that kind of stuff. The problem is with a lot of that stuff is that person says, hey, the trolley problem, you should, let the 5 people get hit by the trolley. And then the other person says, no, you got to throw the switch and have the one person get hit. And both sides can perfectly refute each other, and you talk about that for an hour, and then everyone says, well, that was fun. You go home, you don't get anywhere. So the purpose of this ethics course was to really be able to apply it, to be able to move forward, to get something accomplished, to have these conversations in the workplace, in other spheres, but actually, at the end, be all right, now we know what to do. Now we know what the right action is. And that was the goal about this.
Okay.
So the course kind of goes like this. There's fundamentals, which is the summary course. It'll be free. There's big concepts behind ethics. That is a little bit of the more academic stuff. I couldn't have a certificate in ethics and not talk about these big kind of fundamental ethics ideas. But that's just one of the courses. There's Make Something Ethical, the formula, where I came up with the ethical formula, and you can go to ethicalformula.com and check it out. But that's that's sort of how it works and
how to calculate
ethics for your target audience, which is kind of an important thing to do. Mm-hmm. Ethics in the corporate world, which we talked about today. The ethics of nudges and behavior change, where I walk through the spectrum of behavior change and kind of what's ethical and what's not, dark patterns, that kind of thing, which is very popular right now. And then the last one, which I've not filmed yet, is the strategies to inspire ethical change. Will probably just be actually inspire ethical change. I'm going to get rid of the strategies. But basically, like, okay, so like now that you kind of know what you want to do, how do you actually enact that? How can you turn thoughts into action?
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the that's the certificate.
Yeah. So as we said, this is not published yet, but hopefully soon. But if people are interested in, maybe getting on a list so we can tell them when it is ready, they can email us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, depending on when they listen to this episode, if they don't listen right when it comes out, but they're listening later, it might be available. So go.
Yeah, I would assume July 2021 probably is.
It'll be
is out.
available. Okay. So let's give them, Guthrie, the email address in case they want to email us.
info@theteambuilder.com.
And then in case it's after July and they want to see if the certificate is available, they would go to
courses.theteambuilder.com.
There you go. Yeah, Guthrie, I know you've been really busy. You've been behind the camera, and then you've been doing post-production video editing. I know how big a project it is to do these certificates, having done several of them myself, but it's also really exciting. So I'm looking forward to when this is all done, and then we'll put you to work on the next one. Ha ha ha.
Ha ha ha.
All right. Anything else, Guthrie?
Yeah. No, that's it for me. Thanks for letting me squawk about this.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think it's interesting. It's something I care about, but actually, ethics is not one of my specialties, not something I necessarily know a lot about, so I always enjoy listening to you talk about it. All right, talk to you soon.
Bye.